What's a job that attracts the absolute worst type of person? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. Psychologist here. 50 of us are in the job because we want to help people. 50 are here because they need a lot of help. And sir, we also have a similar competition problem to docs and lawyers when you figure in licensing and program funding. The low admission rates to funded programs tends to mean only hyper-competitive applicants are even admitted to a program. So we, like law and medicine, tend to get a lot of people who are perfectionist workaholics because that's their preferred method of hiding from their problems. Story 2. Tower hands. I worked as an electrician for a cell tower company, and that was the only gig where I had more of my tools stolen, and it was always a tower hand that did it. Answer, former tower hand here. While I mostly had good experiences with my coworkers and we would correct anybody doing something egregious, I could see some companies being full of douchebags. Fact of the matter is, it's such demanding and scary work that companies will take anybody, truly anybody, who's actually willing and able to do it. Criminal record? Who cares? Massive substances problem? Meh. On a list? Doesn't matter. Story 3. Some banks have a pretty bad reputation. Goldman used to be famous for it. Don't know if they've grown out of it. Answer. While I'm not a banker, I did interview at Goldman once. The interview was at something like 7 p.m. Having taken the elevator up and walking onto the office floor, it was still brimming with employees at their desks who all looked absolutely fudge miserable. The interview went well because I had to hang around so long after quitting time from my other job for the interview at Goldman's. I brought a book with me that day, and it just so happened one of the questions they asked me was, "What are you reading?" And I was able to show them, I think it was Roald Dahl's short stories. The next day I was offered the job. My recruiter called me up with the good news and I promptly turned it down. She was livid. I never worked with her again either. A different agency placed me elsewhere, and I was much happier than presumably I ever would have been at Goldman Sachs. Story 4. Scam callers. They have no soul. I told one off once, and he said to me to GFMs, gives you an idea of their values. Answer, it's almost funny how fast the facade drops when you call them out. I was speaking to someone from Amazon about a supposed purchase that I didn't make. When I pointed out why I knew it was a scam, I asked, "Does your mother know what you do for work?" His response was, "Did your mother tell you who your father was? Because I'm your daddy." In all honesty, it kind of pissed me off. It's a decent comeback. But looking back now, it's just hilarious to me that he couldn't keep up the ruse for even 2 minutes. Story 5. Airport security. I've worked in it since 2008. There are people on the front line that started before me and are still riding the power trip. They make the rest of us look bad. It's the little taste of power they have. They're addicted to it. It's like when a bus driver sees you running, then closes the doors when you're 5 feet away and drives off. Answer. I was going to say I work for a cargo ramp, so we deal only with back-of-house TSA incident investigators and security personnel. They all seem pretty good, but they also work in fields like security auditing and compliance, hazmat incident response, etc. Really mundane work that no one ever sees for the most part, but is actually dangerous and requires a decent amount of education and brains, very unlike the public-facing TSO. Story 6. Cho-A president. It's like some people dream of wielding petty power of the color of your mailbox and height of your grass. Answer. You know how, if you are not informed you're living in a HOA area, when you purchase a property, you're not subject to its rules? I dream of that happening to me and having them try to find me for the wrong colored picket fence. Well, geez, Karen, thanks for letting me know. I'll paint it neon orange with vibrant violet center lines just to devalue the entire neighborhood with an eyesore. Also, you can't find me. I ain't HOA. Story 7. Private equity no contest. Why did Red Lobster go bankrupt? Because PE went in, bought it, then leased the buildings back to the business? Why? Because the entire goal of PE is to take something that works, bleed it, then sell the parts all so they can make money. Answer. It's not just lobster. Think of the decline of most major companies over the last 20 years. The parasite, private equity, is usually the final nail in the coffin. Most companies have bumps along the way. Some have investors or government bail them out. But if it's private equity, it's a rot that will surely eliminate. Most jobs that have some level of power over people are the ones that have horrible staff. The reason is people. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Story 8. From what I've seen, leadership in non-profits, not-for-profits, can get some real fudge-ups that want to power trip on the smallest stuff and would never hack it in a more professional environment. Answer: I met a guy who ran a nonprofit food pantry X5. I thought that was admirable. Went on a date with him. Turns out he was a disgusting human being. He wasn't even the president, but president's son. We live in a very wealthy area, and he would just show up at golf courses to pay and schmooze people to donate their company stipends to his pantry, etc. Sure, okay, all for the greater good, I guess. If they declined, he would guilt them into paying his rounds free. He also said he was visiting a pantry in person tomorrow. Admirable, because it was a good photo op, not admirable. He then told me how rich he was and even more rich his family was because of this. They traveled all the time, and he wanted to scoop me up and fly me away. These were hardly the only questionable comments. The only thing he wanted to talk, or gloat about, was himself. And boy, did he. He also tried to play footsie with me and kiss me twice. I told him we were incompatible and I had to go. Big fudge, yikes. I went on a date to get to know someone that loves helping as much as I do, not to jet set on your misappropriated blood fortunes while the people you're supposed to be helping do without. Haven't spoken to him since. Story 9. Politics. Ambition to be a politician should be an exclusion criteria for the job. Power-hungry people. Answer: the major problem, one of the major problems, for there are several, one of the many major problems with governing people is that of whom you get to do it, or rather of who manages to get people to let them do it to them. To summarize, it is a well-known fact that those people who must want to rule people are, ipso facto, those least suited to do it. To summarize the summary, anyone who is capable of getting themselves made president should on no account be allowed to do the job. Douglas Adams. Story 10. Being an influencer. I have never heard of one that isn't a sociopath, narcissistic, or arrogant. They are all terrible. Answer: my cousin is an IG model, and she's cool. Really great conversationalist, fun av, and extremely ambitious. She's probably the most successful 20-year-old I know. Yeah, she's also a whore sometimes and occasionally flaky, but she's not a bad person. Same with the others I've met. I do also think that people more partial to Reddit are like the antithesis of influencers, so most are going to dislike them for no real justifiable reason. Wanting to be in the public eye and earning money in that space doesn't make you a bad person inherently or otherwise. Story 11. Finance bros. They make their money, which I respect, but do they all have to be Dewey clones of each other? Story 12. I think many of the jobs mentioned here have great impact on your personality, as opposed to attracting a certain type of person. Story 13. School administrators. I've encountered so many with unhealthy and unchecked egos and use of power control. Story 14. Call centers, especially for things like bill collecting and cold call sales. I worked for a job placement outfit right out of college, and we had a couple large call centers we did the hiring for. While most of our clients had some standards, the call centers would literally take anybody. Their turnover rate was so high they couldn't be picky. They would take people nobody else would touch with a 10-foot pole, substances addicts, intimacy offenders, convicted felons, including rapists and murderers. They didn't care. If you had a pulse and could fill a seat, they would take you. Answer: my previous company was a call center. They planned on people only lasting 6 months and didn't know what to do with me when I had been there for 2 years. As long as you weren't a convicted felon, they would hire you. I worked with one guy that loved his stolen prescription pills and would sit there during slow times and sort through them and wax poetic about the effects of them individually and when combined with each other. If he couldn't decide what to take, he'd take several random pills just to see what would happen and hope for the best. He finally discovered meth, and he decided that was just downright magical. About a month later, he decided the Pacific Northwest was meth mecca and abruptly moved out there. Another guy kept getting bounced around on shifts and scheduled to minimize as much as possible contact with women at work that had restraining orders against him. I'd run into him again at my next company, where he somehow landed an IT job and started collecting new restraining orders. I was coming in one afternoon as he was being walked out, and that was the last I saw of him. Not sure how he passed the background check, unless the previous ones all expired before applying. Another lived in his in-laws' garage and thought he was living like a king because he could pull his car in and be on the couch before the garage door closed. The topless bar was the best invention known to man, and as soon as he accrued 8 hours of time and had a fresh paycheck, he'd call out to spend it there. It was quite interesting times. Story 15. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. Soldiers are sometimes wonderful people doing what they think is best, and just as often, they are complete psychopaths. I met several people in my 9 years who were mentally unqualified to hold a weapon. Most are in between, like me, who just need college money or a career. Their service is not a sacrifice for their country, but a judgment call on what's best for them. Story 16. Homeowners Association President. Somehow power tripping over other people's grass attracts the kind of energy that ruins barbecues and childhoods. Story 17. Politics. I don't care what their political affiliation is. The best ones are either the best actors or the best liars. I mean, how do so many politicians become multimillionaires so quickly after taking office and getting such cushy jobs after leaving office while only having a salary of what? $200K a year in an expensive place to live like Washington, D.C. and having a home in their home state? Story 18. Politicians. Wanting to be in power over thousands, if not millions of people will always be a red flag to me. Even if they have pure intentions at first, they can easily become corrupt. Story 19. Police. Both of the absolute worst racist bullies from my high school are now cops, both in towns neighboring the one we grew up in. A third guy who was a raging misogynist and seemed to always have a Jew joke on hand is an investigator with a DA's office a few counties over. Story 20. Prison guards. They are on the same level as the people they are being paid to watch. Crooked, substances, dealers, all the things. Story 21. Nursing. There are so many HS mean girls who grew up to be nurses for the money, but could care less about the patients as actual people. Not the whole profession, of course, but certainly a high number. Story 22. Customer retention specialists deserve a special place in hell. I spent months trying to cancel McAfee antivirus software after nearly tripling its rates over 2 years. I had built up a new box that only ran Linux and had no need for their expensive bloatware. Even after disclosing this fact, it took me saying no 5 times before they finally relented. Story 23. Real estate agents, hands down, not even a close second. I have to work with them regularly, and 19 out of every 20 are absolute batshit insane and totally impossible to deal with. There are many running jokes in the mortgage world about real estate agents for this reason. Story 24. Lots of pilots are arseholes. I've been one since 1988, and somebody just said, "You're the nicest pilot I've ever met. The best worst compliment I've ever had." Answer. I'm an airline worker, and I unfortunately must confirm I was literally looking for an answer mentioning pilots and another profession that I also had to deal with. Definitely, they aren't all bad. Some pilots are just basic guys or gals and nerds, but the ones who are bad are really bad. We remember to always be on guard when dealing with a pilot. Story 25. Believe it or not, psych, some of the worst people I have met were my coworkers in psych, and this seems to be consistent with other people's experiences. Also, some of the worst people I encountered were the psych workers in charge of my own care when I was a patient. Story 26. All the male bullies from my school became cops or car salesmen. All the female bullies became nurses or HR managers. Story 27. Prison guard. They are either ex or want to be cops that couldn't get hired or guys that just like to bully and now get to make money doing it. Usually shoot people in and out. Story 28. Private equity venture capital investment banking. These people are generally the worst types of characters you will encounter. Selfish sociopaths who worship at the altar of the dollar. Total scum. Story 29. I find people that work in the construction field are the most consistent with their brainwashed, bootlicking, good old boy attitude. They might not be the worst, but it is so consistent. The putting others down, especially new people, sucking your boss off, meanie about others' work to remind everyone, mostly yourself, how good you are at your job. Working your jerk off with no limit what you will do for your company, not because you are loyal to your company, which isn't treating you what you're worth, but because you're hooked to the dopamine rush of being the boys. Being in a position to put others down for their incompetence or laziness, and to paint a picture that you're worth the pay raise they won't give you. Answer. I'm a little surprised I'm not seeing construction work higher up. I know this is more anecdotal, but the guys I'm surrounded by are awful fudge people. They dislike their wives, they dislike their kids. Zero emotional regulation, so it's not a surprise when they lose their temper at you, throw tools at you, etc. The behavior is accepted as well, considering I rarely ever see someone get reprimanded for shoot behavior, not to mention how they tend to carry very openly misogynistic, racist opinions. The environment is very much an echo chamber for them. God forbid a woman is just looking to make money from an honest day's work, can't go a day without calling the black folk on the job site gorillas, or mocking brown-skinned people that they're going to get deported. What's funny is, I live in a liberal city. I might be ran into the occasional jerk prior to working in construction, but it's like they all have collectively funneled into this shithole. Sucks because the trades can be such a lucrative and interesting career. Story 30. Not the worst, but honorable mention. Psychotherapists. After being in the industry, I'm convinced there are two types of therapists: empaths who burn out quickly, and narcissists, possibly on psychopathy spectrum. The narcissists are the successful ones because they don't feel burnout like the rest of us. They can contort to how clients want them to be in session and can tolerate even the most energetically challenging personality disorders when the rest of us would feel like a living voodoo doll. Narcissists can handle very full caseloads and still have incredible marketing at the top of Google. I've known several people like this, and I know who they are in private. In fact, one of them lost his license and was on a true crime podcast less than 3 years after licensure. But unfortunately, it's those personalities who can sustain the career long term. Story 31. I work as a medical resident, and the amount of entitled and socially low-skilled people working as doctors is wild, like literally sociopaths. I guess the higher the grades have to be for a certain profession, the more sociopaths it attracts. Answer. From over in psychology, that's been studied a little bit, and the most likely answer is basically that. The whole process is so hyper-competitive and demanding that it primarily attracts people who are competitive, perfectionistic, prone to being workaholics, etc. And because most med students go straight through from HS College Med School residency, they have fairly limited exposure to the world outside the medical cloister. When they finally do come in contact, usually in their clerkships, it's a massive traumatic shock to them, and they tend to retreat back into being fact-based workaholics. It's no secret that a good chunk of y'all live like functional hermits for 4 to 6 years of your education, undergrad through MY2. Any of the higher stakes careers, though, tend to bring out the worst in people. Story 32. Nurses, they tend to be bullies looking for victims, and honestly, upper management selects for people without empathy. Story 33. A lot of people I've known who were total losers, bullies, misogynistic, sociopathic, even a person who was an ex-con for violent crimes I've known, become real estate agents. It's easy to get into, pays well, and requires a certain level of smarminess to do really well. Obligatory, not all real estate agents. My file is an agent, and he isn't an asshat, but lots of real estate agents. Housing prices exploded inexplicably out of trend in my city years ago. It turned out it was because real estate agents were having illegal bidding wars trying to maximize their commissions. They fudge a lot of people over. It tracks. Story 34. Police officer. There's some genuinely nice folks just trying to help their community, but also some shitbags who just want the power to screw other people over. Story 35. C-suite. I've never met people more horrible, cruel, and disconnected than the ones that belong to C-suite. They're completely devoid of empathy, humanity, and compassion. I dislike dealing with them. This is one of the biggest reasons I have resisted promotions, because I need a buffer between me and the C-suite. I have accepted the pay cut and lower positions so that I can have minimal interaction with these evil, satanic assholes. Story 36. Managers, particularly in retail and restaurants, always bullies to their employees and allow abusive customers to walk all over them on a daily basis. Story 37. Security. Half of them have the mentality of cops, but fell short of their standards in some way, so they had to settle for security. Story 38. Police. Anyone who wants to be the tool of oppression and exploitation for the one is a traitor to working class people. They are legally bound to enact violence on anyone who resists oppression and exploitation. The police attract those who want to maim and eliminate people, especially if they are black or brown. Historically, many cops were in the KKK. They have diversified into many other far-right groups and militias. If they aren't the ones brutalizing people for trivial offenses, they are covering for those that do. Basically, all cops are bad. Story 39. Journalism. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, there are two kinds of journalists. Lying scumbags who will say anything to stoke controversy, no matter how many people they hurt. They'd publish an article calling their own mother a whore if they thought it would get clicks. People who think scrolling Twitter for quotes is a hard day's work. There are very few journalists left who will ever do any kind of actual research. Story 40. Sales of any type. Fake smiles, pretend to be your friend, yet very manipulative and dishonest. That's salesman for you. Story 41. Security guards in municipal government buildings. Every single one I've ever met has been a monumental jerk that acts like they're not wannabe cops. Story 42. I once had a software engineering manager that was trying to be a LinkedIn influencer. One of the worst people I've ever met. Answer, I can imagine. He probably wants to be like those people who write articles like 9 Reasons Why You'll Never Become a Data Scientist. If you want to see how embarrassingly vain, self-absorbed, self-important, cringe-inducingly arrogant those tech people are? Just read that article, or the other hundreds that are just like it. They think they're God's gift to society. Story 43. CEOs are statistically more likely to be psychopaths than most other occupations. Assassins may rank higher, but I doubt it. Story 44. Truck drivers. According to the FBI, there are probably about 450 long-haul truckers who are active serial killers, so that's pretty bad, I guess. Story 45. Management. There's a certain type of person who thinks management positions mean less work, more status, and the right to speak to people lesser than them like shoot. These people generally only get these jobs because they're very good at jerk kissing and putting other people down while inflating their own few achievements. They inevitably end up dodging responsibility, palming off blame onto their subordinates, and if any actual work needs doing, they disappear like Batman with a smoke pellet. They will often create a little harem of 2-3 subordinates who will be the favorites and can do nothing wrong and get any and all benefits, while everyone else gets jumped on for minor infractions and have to jump through all sorts of hoops to get anything done. Anyone they seem as a threat, such as anyone who will call them out in front of higher management, will be bullied and pushed out. And if they ever achieve higher management status themselves, will only elevate people they can easily intimidate. Source. Been in manufacturing as an operator, union leader and supervisor for 25 years, and it's every darn time. Answer. Luckily, not all management is like that, and in the Netherlands, we usually don't much tolerate shoot like that from management. People like that better start getting eyes in their backs. But yeah, they do exist in dysfunctioning companies where the culture is sick because of top management giving a bad example or not putting their foot down on bad managers. Story 46. Middle manager. They're completely useless and they know it. Adult babysitter who just takes notes on you for your year-end review. Story 47. Healthcare. I understand the passionate ones, but most I know are very self-indulgent and just bad people. Story 48. Cops and umpires referees. It's no coincidence that a lot of cops do umpire referee work on the side. For the few good ones, it's an extension of their sense of fair play. For the majority of them, it's a chance to exercise authority over others. Story 49. Nurse, hairdresser, dental tech, pilot, fireman, policeman, EMTs, car sales, home repair sales, Anderson replacement window sales. Story 50. Controversial, but a lot of DEI professionals I've met have been very nasty people. I'm not against DEI at all, but in my limited experience, it attracts a lot of narcissists. Story 51. Police or any position of authority with a monopoly on coercive violence. Insurance sales is a very close second. Story 52. Private equity on any level. These folks are pits, and it seems they lose all humanity the longer they do it. Story 53. Product management, project management, program management, and any other similar jobs people do after their MBA. Story 54. Merely to one up for one. Automotive insurance adjuster, vindictive and soulless real estate agent. Not all, but there are many that will advise you accept an offer that is $100K lower than what you could get because it's not a huge hit to their commission, or will have you offer too much on a property because your $50K overbid is not really a negative for them. Story 55. I worked at Jiffy Lube many years ago, and they're always stealing from the cars. They are all ex-cons. Some of them were all right, though. Story 56. Working at animal shelter, only the coldest of hearts could stand being around what goes on there. And cold hearts are FKN assholes. Story 57. Police. I dislike to say it because I do respect many and what they can do positively and often do, but the bad eggs are plentiful. Story 58. Strip club. Doesn't even have to be a stripper, just a bartender server girl from there. They're used to all the male attention, so odds are, if you aren't giving her all your attention, she'll start posting herself more and say, shoot like act right, because I have a lot of options. You should feel lucky I'm with you. Literally, my regulars tip me just to talk to me, and you want me to pay for the meal? Acts like she's the only girl in the world and usually selfish ASF. Don't get me wrong, they're usually very pretty, but again, pretty with a shoot personality. They'll drain you because it'll never be enough. Story 59. I dislike to say it, but when I worked in the trades briefly, it was a mix of races, but predominantly Black and Latino. Anytime I was alone in a car van with a white worker, also white, the most vile MAGA racist, sexist, homophobic rants I had to endure. They were all from Long Island or Staten Island. Story 60. Sadly, where I live is doctor. You'd think this profession would attract some caring individuals, but it always seems to be about the money. Story Story 61. Any position that combines money, influence, and power over others with little to no consequences for actions taken. Other than the obvious contenders, pedophiles, murderers, abusers, rapists, traffickers, etc., I believe unidentified narcissists are probably the most disruptive personality dynamic running under the radar in the world today. Narcissism, a disorder in which a person has an inflated sense of self-importance. Narcissistic personality disorder is found more commonly in men. The cause is unknown but likely involves a combination of genetic and environmental factors. Symptoms include an excessive need for admiration, disregard for others' feelings, an inability to handle any criticism, and a sense of entitlement. The disorder needs to be diagnosed by a professional. They are drawn to positions of power, influence over others, as it brings them a sense of validation and status. Now imagine an entire political system that empowers, employs, and makes untouchable these things. Empathy is a core defining human trait. If they lack this ability to possess or learn, then, in my opinion, they are a subcategory of human and should not only be identified, but restricted from being eligible to hold positions of power over others where empathy is needed to operate in that capacity effectively. Story 62. Property managers seem to only care about corporate bottom line and will turn a blind eye to the needs of the residents. We have a shared laundry facility complete with washers and dryers. Yeah, it doesn't matter if all the washers are down except one, and even that one keeps the clothes soaked. We have a gym facility on site. Yeah, but only one treadmill works. We provide a heat. Yeah, but it's a window unit and maintenance hasn't come in days. Story 63. Real estate. Almost every realtor failed at their first career, and it really shows. They don't care about the house. They don't care about the buyer. They just care about the commission. Story 64. Gonna add one I haven't seen. Energy traders. When I was looking for work in IT, I went to a job convention for IT professional, and half the companies there were energy traders. I have never before or since met that many people I felt would be totally willing to eliminate me if it would earn them like $1,000. They buy up electricity when there is a surplus, often due to very sunny days, solar energy, or windy days, and sell it on for a profit. But they were so fudge sleazy, like totally open about the fact that they didn't really create anything of value and how they were totally useless middlemen. They were proud of it. They honestly terrified me. Story 65. I'm shocked U.S. police officers weren't mentioned. It's notorious for attracting people with a power trip. Story 66. CNAs are consistently either angels on earth or fudge awful. I don't know why that is, but it seems to be one or the other. Story 67. Anyone who sells anything that sells illusions of luxury or success, those who peddle false hope or exaggerated lifestyles, timeshares, MLM, crypto NFT bros, Instagram travel influencers, lifestyle coaches. Story 68. Coming from a prior insurance agent. It's insurance agents and realtor real estate agents, full of narcissists and opportunists. Story 69. Any leadership role that gives them any sort of power over other people without someone willingable to hold them accountable for their words and their actions. Story 70. Law enforcement, first responders, medical, any job that is constantly praised as heroes attracts people that need tons of adoration. Sales musicians. Story 71. I was told last week by my superiors as a recruiter that I need to find a McKinsey consultant with crypto experience. The general consensus among those that would have to actually work with that person if we hired them is that they'd probably be up there with the most intolerable personalities that may exist. Story 72. If domestic violence is a very bad thing, and it is, statistically, it's step-parents and lesbian wives. Story 73. Health insurance company staff that manage claims. I don't know how anyone could do that job. You have to be a terrible person to be able to do it for even one day. Story 74. Influencer. If you can call that a job, people don't understand just how much free shoot they get, on top of how much they get paid to advertise said free shoot, yet they still find a way to be the most ungrateful and self-centered people you've ever seen. It's very comical because you think to yourself, there's no way in hell this is how they interact with the real world every day. Story 75. Anyone doing outreach sales that I've known was an asshat. So high on their fart, they could do noting wrong. Story 76. Police. Not that all who want to be cops are the worst, but a high percentage absolutely are. Same with politicians. Story 77. Police officer, any law enforcement. There are truly some great cops out there, but there are also power-tripping losers who peaked in high school and just want to carry a gun and be a bad jerk. Story 78. Politics. Absolutely no one who is in politics cares about anything or anyone other than themselves or their own power. I am constantly astounded by people who believe otherwise. Story 79. Cops. Whether you're on the right or left, you know that a ton of cops are massive ego-driven assholes that got into policing so they could have authority over others. Story 80. Law enforcement. Seems like there are a lot of bullies there. The amount of Punisher logos I see from these people that don't understand the character in the slightest is quite telling. Story 81. Police officers. Either they were bullies in school or got bullied and now have to take their insecurities out on us. I once had a cop tell me that I don't exist because people our age, yes, he was the same age as me, always have stuff on their record and I don't. He essentially made me his project because he didn't like that I had morality and he didn't. But that's a story for another time. Story 82. Priests, politicians, and cops. People who seek power over other people's fates are the people who should never have that power. Story 83. Cops unfortunately attracts the best and worst, and the pressures of the system often turn those best closer to the worst over years. Story 84. Law enforcement, they may start out good, but never end that way. Before people start going, yeah, but my insert relative's name here comments show, let me just remind you that those maybe good cops protect the crimes of the bad ones. Cops don't say anything bad about their coworkers because some police forces have been known to outright take down whistleblowers. Story 85. Politics slot of disordered people, sociopaths and narcissists, because they love power, influence, and control. Story 86. Any career that offers the person power, someone will abuse it and make the rest of the world pay for all the bad things that have happened to them. Story 87. I see a lot of mentions of car sales, but why hasn't anyone mentioned real estate agents yet? It's literally the same thing on a larger scale, and they all have a sense of superiority because of it. Story 88. Middle management, also law enforcement, though this is more like the single bad apple running the basket type of thing. Story 89. Law enforcement, politician, lobbyist, Fortune 500 CEO, strip club owner, pawnbroker, payday loan officer. In that order. Story 90. The clergy. There are some who are in it because they feel a call to service, but the majority are people who want to feel some sort of power over others and want people to have to listen to what they have to say. Story 91. Law enforcement. It is a job that attracts horrible people or turns people into horrible people. Most decent people get out of law enforcement once they realize this. Story 92. Politician. The job attracts would be tyrants, missionaries, martyrs, ideologues, and those who are just looking to corrupt everything they can. Story 93. Law enforcement. It's not morals and values enforcement. It's do what you're told regardless of the impact enforcement. Evil, pure evil. Story 94. Police officers. Two types. The ones who want to do good, probably because their old man was a cop or something, or they want power, and these are the over-the-top, super alpha, wannabe, fudge boys, like they are raging on steroids to stop some crime. They are the ones who violation women in handcuffs, shoot innocent people, cause riots, do dangerous shoot that eliminate innocent people, etc. The only thing equal to that is politicians. To be so self-righteous and to desire that kind of authority and power is a true sociopath. And what's worse is the more sociopathic they are, the better the politician they are. This world is fudge. Story 95. This is going to be pretty controversial, but leadership roles that work with children. I'm not saying everyone in those jobs are bad people. Far from it. But the truly bad people who specifically seek out jobs that work with children in order to exploit them or fulfill some fudge-up fantasy, they are a special kind of monster. Story 96. I feel like you have to be a special kind of terrible to get into medical debt collection. I realize that might not be a vocation people seek out, but if you land there and then stay there, what the fudge? My wife was set up once by a temp agency to work at one, and she lasted a day. She said after her second call to someone in debt for cancer treatment, she knew she wouldn't be back. Story 97. Therapists. You learn a lot about someone when they vent their innermost thoughts to a paid stranger. Story 98. Sadly, there are a lot of those scams that are human traffickers. Kidnap people who had come from other countries looking for work only to find themselves forced to make these scam calls or get tortured or eliminate. Just remember that you are most likely talking to a kidnapped victim with a gun to their head to make theses calls. Story 99. A startup that has a good IPO price. Suddenly you hear a lot of, well, at Amazon, Meta, Google, Netflix, we did it like this. End up with leaders who want to cash out their stock ASAP and bounce to the next spot. Story 100. Lately, I've noticed some really shifty people in the door solar solicitations. I'm sure there are worse jobs on here mentioned, but man, this one here is an up-and-comer LOL. Story 101. Anything where the main draw is power over others. For example, cop, politician, financial positions, nursing, correctional officers, etc. Story 102. Businessmen. Eventually they bend the rules, then one day like magic they think the laws don't apply to them, and they usually don't. Story 103. Jobs in position of authority. Police, prison officer, security, and more controversially, head teachers. Story 104. Cops, they're either Andes, good, they care about their job and people, or Barneys, bad, on a power trip, and often criminals themselves, and you never know which one you're going to get. Story 105. Dog trainers, specifically those who train in personal protection, sport, tracking, etc. Their egos know no bounds. Story 106. Strip club pole wipe. Yeah, it's a thing, LOL. The dude at the one I like to go to with my partner sometimes has been there more than 13 YRs now. His job is genuinely to just clean up the stage and collect money left on it for the dancer. Has kind of a jerk law. The dancers don't like him either and typically try to collect the money themselves. Where I live, they play coin games, so there's 1 and 2 coins everywhere. With a magnet because he steals from them, apparently. He must know the owner or something to have lasted that long stealing from the talent. Story 107. Anything to do with children, especially children who are disabled, mentally or physically. On one end, you have people who care for the children they're looking after or teaching. On the other, you have child abusers and pedophiles. Story 108. B2B sales guys, estate agents, parasites that'll straight lie through their teeth to you to get what they want. Story 109. Law enforcement, if they aren't one of the noble ones who truly aim to protect and serve, they are only there because they want power and control over people and to manipulate the law in their favor. Story 110. Policemen. This is from personal experience of being in relationships with them. Not a police-hating criminal. Story 111. Attorney. Not really bad people, usually, just the kind of people who can't tell the difference between an argument and a conversation and will disagree with you for fun rather than because they actually have a different opinion. When people ask if my spouse is also a lawyer, I say no, thank God. Story 112. For-profit education. I knew a guy who got out of the military and then was volunteering helping veterans apply for college. He said the for-profit education industry was just falling over itself trying to exploit them. Story 113. Hairdressers. Some genuinely want to make people happy, but most are stuck in high school even in their 40s. Story 114. I was a dispatcher at a black car service, and nearly all of the drivers had some kind of personality disorder and substance abuse problem. It was wild times. Story 115. Warehouse work. So many of my coworkers use or sell substances and brag about treating women like shoot. Story 116. In Australia, real estate agent. Our housing market is incredibly competitive and it exclusively attracts garbage human beings. Story 117. Mental health nurse. Not all nurses are mean girls, but every single mean girl I've known wants to go into mental health nursing. Story 118. Any job that confers automatic authority over other human beings without needing to demonstrate qualification and weak accountability oversight. Story 119. Law enforcement, military, prison guards, basically anything that gives somebody authoritarian power over other people. Story 120. People in finance, consulting, and tech. They seem only out there to make money, not to make any humanly difference in the world. Story 121. Definitely politicians or a congressman. I couldn't have less respect for a job. No qualifications needed, just potloads of money. Story 122. Tow truck driver, repo of any kind. Police officer, C-level executive. Yeah, I know there are some great people in those groups, but in general, they suck. Story 123. Leo. Bullies and killers get paid to be bullies and killers, with almost no consequences. Politicians. Story 124. Tow truck drivers. I worked for a tow company for a brief time in high school. The sense of entitlement on the road and the enjoyment they get from screwing someone over is sickening. Story 125. Nursing. Many nurses are absolutely amazing human beings, but it also attracts some of the most callous, mean, and awful people. Story 126. Phone sales. May not attract the worst, but it's the worst that stick around because they're good at being the worst. Story 127. ICE. Can't make it as real cops. Military probably wouldn't take them. But hey, they get tactical gear and get to harass brown people. Story 128. Any job that gives you permission to hurt other people. Cops, ICE, military, even politicians use those other groups to do violence on their behalf. Story 129. Anything with a modicum of authority draws in bullies. Elementary school teacher, cops, ICE agents, senior care attendant, etc. This is certainly not universal. I've known good teachers, cops, and caretakers. Probably universally true of ICE agents, though, given what they do. Story 130. I can't say it attracts, I'll say it changes people to their worst version. Anything dealing with customer service. Story 131. A job that often attracts the absolute worst type of person is mall cop with a power complex. Someone who craves authority but can't handle real responsibility. It's not the job itself that's bad, it's how it can give a tiny amount of power to someone who uses it to feel superior, control others, or feed their ego. Same goes for HOA board members, airport security, or certain middle managers. Basically, any role where the authority is limited, but the ego can be unlimited. Story 132. Cops attract a lot of legit psychopaths and narcissists, like at least 30 of them, have kind of personality disorder. Story 133. Cops, the clergy, politics, nurses, surgeons, psychologists, the army, social work. Any role which holds a significant position of power attracts terrible people. Story 134. Marketing. The profession is to acquire precise and personal information about people and then use it to do anything they want within the realm of the law. Marketing grad turned bootcamp coder. Story 135. CNA. Most are whores. The majority don't care. Just want the money and the rest have the love and compassion drained from them by management. Story 136. Doctors and surgeons who are only in it for the money and prestige. They love to gaslight and love the power they have over patients. So why do they care? Story 137. Working in a store that sells adult content would be the worst job that attracted the worst people. Story 138. Prison guards attracts the same kind of person as cops, but the physical and mental requirements are lower. You're surrounded by bad people all the time, and they're all under your control until they aren't. But that's a different problem. Story 139. Nursing. Some of them are in it for the power over the sick, injured, and dying. They withhold pain meds, talk down to patients, unplug call lights, etc. Just because they can. Answer. I was going to put this, but I didn't feel like having a pack of nurses complaining and coming for me in the comments. They tend to be very clannish. I've never met people who drink more and cheat on their spouses. I always love how uppity they get about addiction because they have a high incidence of addiction in their field. I working in addiction and see it firsthand and have seen the stats too. Story 140. Everyone that does road work in RI seems to be a drunken idiot. At least that's what the quality of their work indicates. Story 141. Sales positions that have commission. Attracts selfish mouth runners. Most times liars too. Good ones and partially manipulative people. No thanks to the people in sales. Story 142. I worked at a credit bureau in my 20s. The worst of the worst people. They loved harassing people and thought they were doing the right thing. Story 143. This isn't true for everyone in near field, but most of the shitbags I know have a job that is based on helping themselves and not others, purely for their gain. Story 144. Real estate. So many of these people are just in it for the commission and don't give a shoot about their customers. Story 145. There are a lot of high school bullies in construction, particularly on the business side. A lot of honest, hardworking people too, but you have to deal with your fair share of aggressive alpha males. Story 146. For some reason, working in head office for large brewery chains attracts absolute cunts, but similar positions for distillers are all lovely. Story 147. Tow truck drivers. Too many times I've seen or had scum tow cars illegally and force people to pay hundreds to get it back. Story 148. Government politician, police and church, those pedo priests only get transferred or moved to different countries and do it again, lol. Story 149. Automotive factory workers. I swear every factory guy or gal here in Detroit is either a jerk, a slut, or a stuck-up meanie. Story 150. Halloween haunted houses in all states, cities, and towns seem to have some creepy jerk people. I personally know of one in MA that hired multiple felons to play as actors in their haunted houses. Story 151. People that sell business courses or personal improvement seminars. Con men or cult leaders, no in between. Story 152. Sales. It's their entire job to make you buy something you didn't want. If you did, they wouldn't need sales. Story 153. Law enforcement. Some of the worst people are drawn to it for the weapons and having power over other people. Story 154. Police, politician, priest. Anyone who actively seeks a position of power is 9 or 10 times a complete piece of shoot. Story 155. President. The sort of person who is a great leader likely doesn't have the appetite for something like a presidency. Even good presidents must have ginormous egos. Story 156. Management, especially principals. The most fake human being I've ever experienced. HR people are awful too. Story 157. Police, sadly. If we use the same qualifications and training they do in most of Europe, my answer would be different. Story 158. Without even looking at the comments section, I can already predict a tidal wave of law enforcement officer and military. Story 159. Investment banking and financial services compliance directors in private wealth management for FINRA registered firms. Story 160. Unfortunately, whatever you call the people, the manual labor around caring for human bodies, especially cleaning and feeding them. Low entry requirements and clients who often can't complain. Story 161. Probably homelessness advocate groups who get government financial assistance to house and feed the homeless, but keep the money for themselves as part of their pay package. Story 162. Any company that says, "Here we are family," take that job and watch them use that line every time they want to guilt you. You ain't fam, and when times get hard, if you didn't realize when you should have, you'll be left out to dry. Story 163. Anything that pays close to minimum wage, requires very little skill, and yet gives a little bit of power. Security guard in an office, for example. Story 164. Personal experience? People who work with coding and computers in general. Had someone used those skills to track my IP address without my knowledge? Story 165. Sales. While there are some great salespeople out there, there's just way too many that are willing to screw people over. Realtors are the biggest crooks, though. Story 166. Being a cop. Went to high school with a kid who was a fucking super douche, who went on to be a cop and ended up getting caught cheating on his wife with one of the inmates at the jail he was working, LOL. And to top it off, his last name is Derryberry. Story 167. Anything commission only incentivizes people to do whatever it takes to make a sale through any means necessary. Story 168. Judging from the comments, every job does. Or it might be worse people are everywhere irrespective of job. Story 169. That job that Heisenberg had, he was such a psycho too, making everyone say his name, and he was always knocking on people's doors. I wonder whatever happened to him. Story 170. Property managers. They scam their own customers to keep their job with a landlord who often enough is a slumlord. Story 171. Law enforcement attracts those who enjoy harming others with impunity. There are some who want to serve public good, but they appear to be the minority these days. Story 172. IT. Many network admin guys are self-important troglodytes or alpha bros. Think DJT if he was never rich. Story 173. Cop. There are numerous negative reasons why anyone would do the job, but only one pretty weak good reason. Just looking at current events shows the scumbags that enjoy being law enforcement. Story 174. I've never met a person in HR who didn't have a cluster B personality disorder. They're almost always women with a covert narcissistic streak. Story 175. Nursing. Specifically women in nursing. The workplace with a group of women, nurses, is toxic. They gossip, lie, backstab coworkers, and bully each other. I don't understand why someone would go into a profession that helps people. Then they behave horribly to each other. I've seen it again and again. Story 176. Having worked as support staff for one of those companies, any kind of financial advisor role, the people I had to work for would knowingly undercut everyone in their path to get ahead. It felt very much like a pyramid scheme. They would advise you on life insurance and then add on all other kinds of crap knowing you would never need it, just so they could make some extra commission. The people working that job felt and acted like failed car salespeople and borderline harassed people with how many times they'd call them. I'm glad I got away from that company. Story 177. Pretty much anything that confers social status and people are proud of attracts at least some terrible people. Story 178. Corrections officers. Was one for 5 years. did it for the insurance, and I desperately needed a job. The majority of the people I worked with who are lifelong CEOs live for cruelty. Even if an inmate was mentally ill, thanks Reagan, they were so mean to them. Story 179. Corrections or any job where there's discretion with physically assaulting other humans. Because unfortunately, many folks with hidden, aggressive tendencies and or unseen psychological issues tend to get drawn to them because the thought of being able to exert control, power, and dominance over others is something they derive some level of pleasure from. We need more caring, empathetic folks in these jobs, especially to counter the high numbers of these personality types that adversely affect the populations they are serving. Story 180. I used to be a professional princess, mostly for kids' birthday parties, and I met many wonderful people who did that job, but way more horrible meanie. Some people get into it because they love kids and want to bring joy to others, and some people get into it because they are pretty and need everyone to know how pretty they are and think being pretty is their gift to the world. Story 181. Jobs that involve kids. It attracts some great people, don't get me wrong, but it also attracts the worst humans alive. Story 182. Finance, law enforcement, public service. Hit or miss, some of them are great. Often, with some exceptions, anything with any capability for a power dynamic. Event staff, management, security. Story 183. Stockbrokers. This is coming from someone who is friends with a couple of them. They're good friends because they're always there for me, and they really helped out my wife and I when she was pregnant. But they're the ultimate bullshit artists. They talk out of their jerk when it comes to subjects they know little to nothing about. It's almost like they're afraid to not understand something, so they pass their ramblings and random points off as knowledge, and they're not good at it. It's so easy to see through their facades. Story 184. Nurses are either saints or those high school bullies all grown up with none of the maturing one would expect. There is no in between. Story 185. Animal rescue organizations. The people running those are just the worst. I can understand, of course, they see a lot of horrible situations created by shoot people, but for some reason they take it out on everyone else, almost gleefully so. They are toxic work environment personified and incredibly arrogant because they are such true heroes, at least in their own minds. Story 186. Insurance sales. I'm not saying everyone in that professional is bad. Some are quite kind. I worked in the benefits department of a company that had a large force of insurance salespeople. They would sweet talk, manipulate, bully, badger, and complain to get their own way. I had a coworker who was forced to spend time with one of them to better understand what they did on a day-to-day basis. Her takeaway? I told my parents to never allow one in their house. Story 187. Worked at a restaurant where one manager acted like Gordon Ramsay, minus the skill and charm, just rage and expired mozzarella. Story 188. I see. Police. Those jobs don't make people nasty, aggressive people. ICE and police jobs attracts that kind of person. Story 189. HR by a long shot. It's the official profession of psychotic women who were the mean girl in high school. Story 190. It's marketing. If you disagree, you have not worked in marketing, or you are one of them. The devil dreads marketing teams. Story 191. Working in a union. It's my first union job as a fleet mechanic. I'm 7 years in. In my 25 years of working, I've never met so many absolute shoot human beings collected all under one roof. It's astonishing to me that some of these idiots made it as far in life as they have. I swear if it weren't for the benefits, I would have already moved on. But seriously, where are you finding good medical coverage for your whole family for $100 a month? Story 192. Nurses, people in childcare, cops, social workers, people with power over others, then HR, finances, sales, CEO, and similar. I probably forgot someone, LOL. Story 193. Someone in West attracts the worst workers. Life insurance sales or any type of MLM, luxury car rentals, lease in major vacation destinations, Miami, Vegas, Dubai, Saint-Tropez, London, etc. Crypto gambling, banking, ultra luxury clothes bags attracts the worst customers. Jewelry, secondhand boutiques, or any form of business that offers cash consignment for pre-owned goods. Story 194. I would say that in the last few years that the Republican Party attracts the worst kind of people. I have only ever voted for one Republican, Ronald Reagan, and that was a big mistake. I don't remember why I did it. Maybe a momentary lack of reason. I like Jimmy Carter. Story 195. Pastors, if you're making a living off of teaching folks about Jesus, you've already gone down the path of evil. You need to use folks' tithes to live so you can preach for an hour once per week? Stop it. Get a job, you fudge. Story 196. Bankers, Wall Street, anything finance related really. Politicians, scam call centers. Just read a comment and so decided to add this too, as it was correct. Scamming old people is sick. Story 197. Nightclub DJs in their habitat acting like Picasso artists, pushing buttons being reinforced by rabid fanboys who give them anything just to stand next to them while they play. Story 198. Preschool workers. I used to work in a preschool and found my fellow staff much more difficult to deal with than the kids. Story 199. Nightlife security. Worked in nightlife for over a decade, and I've met dozens of door staff who openly admitted they chose this job because it was an opportunity to cause people physical harm without real consequences, and planned to purposely escalate or instigate conflicts just so they could attack someone. Although I've also met some lovely door staff who wouldn't hurt a fly. Story 200. Marketing firms. So many narcissists in that industry obsessed with image, not just their companies, but also theirs. Story 201. Librarians. Seems many are disliked. Might be a sort of, all this knowledge is mine and you're a fool kind of attitude. Story 202. Any profession that gives access to the most vulnerable people attracts the best and the worst of humanity. Nurses, teachers, religious leaders, caregivers, it'd say, it's probably 95 the best, kindest, most giving people in the world, and 5 pure evil MFS. Story 203. Worst person I met was a corporate lawyer who prided himself on defending CEOs who intimacy harassed women. Story 204. Investment bankers, day traders, CEOs, anything that involves accumulating money and power takes a complete sociopath to be successful. Story 205. Roofing sales guys. Spent many years in the industry. Oof. They do well, and the rare sober ones do even better. Utornashurd. Story 206. From my experience, I've seen the type of social workers who get off on people's misery. I've seen plenty of cops who are plain psychopaths and security guards the same, who just want to subject and control people because they're sadistic and get off on it. Story 207. Estate agent. Door-to-door sales, police, military. Police and military is very black and white IMO. I've met some of the absolute best human beings and some of the most disgusting scumbags in there. Story 208. Many accounts, including my own, regarding behavior, demeanor of uniformed thugs working at border crossing and customs. Story 209. Private equity. They'll stab you in the chest and gaslight you into believing they've done you a favor. Your body won't even be cold before they start rummaging through your pockets for their own amusement. Story 210. What's in one? Surprised anyone didn't say EU fashion industry IDK about the American one? The level of narcissism and ego that comes with those people is unreal. Workplaces are 90 of the time pure hell, a bonanza of backstabbing, shoot-talking, and stress-induced rage. Man, you need to have some guts in this field. Funny thing is, at the end of the day, you're just making clothes, LOL. Story 211. Heard a lot of way more shady of people and jobs that people are mentioning here. But of the more normal jobs, realtors I've met are very dishonest and shady and pull scams to get the sale. Story 212. Sales, IMO. But not all salesperson are like that. Imagine saying no to a product, but a person will continue to convince you to get it, or omitting certain info so they can make a sale, like darn lol. Story 213. IDK, it'd say, the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of the United States government are pretty good at attracting the worst. Story 214. Bailiffs, I cannot fathom that someone would want to throw poor people out on the street for a living. There was a reality show here in Quebec called Huissier, where they would follow bailiffs going out to shoot apartment complexes, seizing people's belongings, and having the police remove the tenants from the premises. Even though they were obviously holding back because of the cameras, most of them looked like disgusting, vile people. Story 215. Police officers, the most dislike, insecure, petty, weak, ignorant, easily triggered, overcompensating POS mefs ever. Story 216. Impound lot receptionist. Never met one who didn't talk to me like I was beneath her. Like lady, stuff happens. I bet her car's been towed in the past. Story 217. Music industry lawyers. They generally specialize in strong-arming teens and young adults into signing over their rights to corporations or similar. Story 218. Any job where wearing a suit is expected. CEO, politician, television personalities, government bureaucrats, and the like. Story 219. Cops, ICE, government, gym teachers, some teachers, managers of all kinds, and pretty much most authority roles. Story 220. Security guards, usually criminal records and have egos the size of a blimp, despite sitting around on their phones most of the day. UK. Story 221. Bouncers. Just in my area, probably a space of 30 miles diameter, we've had 4 instances of bouncers eliminate someone, and tons more of them just aggressively overstepping their responsibilities. Just recently had a bar close because a guy was arguing with a bartender over drinks he didn't order being on his check, which this bar has had accusations of. And the bartenders beat the piss out of him until he was unconscious. Substances his limp body halfway across the bar and then decided to stop and start kicking him while he was laying limp on the floor. Pretty sure he lost an eye, but somehow the dude lived, and the bouncers surprisingly got arrested, despite the police department downplaying the whole thing, since one of their guys was at the bar when it happened and did nothing. Story 222. YouTube prankster attracts people who think harassment is just a misunderstood form of performance art. Story 223. Anything related to cryptocurrency. It's a scam that's allowed to metastasize because the right people have made money from it. Story 224. I've been a software developer for about 8 years, and I am really getting tired of software developers. Boring, off-putting, often unhygienic, gaping, ego-driven assholes. No social skills or empathy, think they have the world's biggest brain, and they're just a tortured genius who is surrounded by idiots. Take them away from their laptop, their ergonomic chair, and staff engineer title. Now they are just a miserable, hapless turd who cannot function or relate to anyone? Answer, or there's the other kind. The slacker idiot who saw the day in the life video on YouTube and half-assed their way through a computer science degree. They think it's an easy path to 6 figures and an easy job with free snacks. They can't do anything, have no interest or curiosity, no drive to improve their skills, and it's easier just to do the work myself. Story 225. Cops. If they weren't cops, they'd be criminals. You know what that thin blue line is? The shirt that stands between them being a cop and then being a criminal. Story 226. I think some of the jobs don't attract the worst people, but rather working at them makes you a worse person. Story 227. Dislike that it's true, but I've worked in many different industries, and I feel like the sad truth is that awful people are in every one of them. The media is not a fun place to work, though. Very hard to get opportunities, and lots of nepotism-based promotions take place, so it's tough to find your way. Kind of gives awful people a platform and makes the workplace super toxic. Story 228. Real estate. I work in it, and I honestly don't want to anymore given how many folks are just absolute scumbags. Story 229. Politics and religion. The former attracts psychopaths and intimacy predators, while the later attracts the gullible and intimacy predators. Story 230. Had to go to an official BMW dealership a while ago to get a recall on my car done. Absolute smug scum working there. Story 231. Florida realtors, all they do is slash, burn, and con. They destroy anything good, tell any lie to make their commission. Story 232, retail management. They often tend to be very demanding jobs for how relatively low-paying they often are, since they're often fairly dispensable. You have to be the type of person who accepts power as a form of payment. Story 233, police. Politicians, I'd say there are a good few people that are not complete bastards, may have entered both professions, but won't get far, or will turn gradually into bastards and making bastard friends and end up with bastard partners and bastard offspring. There are a few exceptions. Obviously, it's not the rule. Story 234. Law enforcement categorizes roofers and concrete workers as the roughest, strongest, as well as meanest men in the trades to deal with. They always have the highest reporting done on them. Story 235. Bank owner or anything involving a bank. They are almost always there to take your money and don't gaff even if you tell them off for something they did. Story 236. Anything finance. No good person lasts longer than a few years in that sector. All those that last are truly horrible people. Story 237. Catholic priests seem to attract pedophiles. School bullies often become cops. Politicians are mostly liars. Auto dealerships attract some nasty, aggressive individuals. Story 238. Lobbyists. Sat by one on a plane a few years ago, and I'll never forget it. Most heartless people you'll ever meet, except you never really get to meet them outside of traveling. Story 239. Security is full of people that even police departments say, "Whoa, you are too intense," when they apply. Story 240. I had a meeting down here with Carlo this morning. We're supposed to see Butch and them on a couple of items. Carlo didn't show, and he don't answer his phone neither. Story 241. Corporate change manager, human resources, people and culture, whatever name they currently go by, they are usually terrible. Story 242. Cops, you have to be a total psychopath to be in a job where beat to a pulp your fellow citizens. When they go the streets to demand their basic rights, don't even get me started on the domestic violence rates. Story 243. ICE bouncers, law enforcement, sometimes, gabatiyon, officials, office managers, finance careers, golf pro shop chefs. Story 244. Police, scum, served 10 years in SF in the Air Force and they were already bad. But civvy cops, punk jerk bullies who think they know everything? Fudge, Story 245. Conductor, like music ones. It attracts big egos who like power tripping, and it seems more of them than the average population are creeps. And the ones who aren't actually nefarious, you can still rely on being freaky, unhinged intimacy deviants. Story 246. I've seen some really demented people working in animal rescue. Just this week, a teenage girl was eliminated by pit bulls that she was trying to help, and the local rescue has decided to use her passing to try to get people to adopt more pit bulls. In her honor. Story 247. Finance. It's full of some of the most cutthroat status and money-obsessed, blowhard douchebags. Thing is now, they're all very well educated, so it's just a more refined type of douchebag. Story 248. Police, military education, and clergy. Most of the people who work in those professions are honorable and have the best intentions. We do need people in those professions, but they do tend to attract a lot of people who just enjoy being the boss and pushing other people around. Story 249. The vast majority of medical device sales representatives I have worked with have been some of the most immoral, greed-driven assholes walking. I long for the day people catch on to this side of the industry like they have big pharma. Story 250. Am laughing so hard at this, but I think it might be prostitution. Lady had a guy ask her to not shower so cheese would form on her butthole. Then when they got together, he asked her to scratch her butt cheese to let him eat it. That's like level 1 of the stuff these women talk about. It straight up gets more horrendous than this, and my mind doesn't comprehend that shoot. Story 251. Call center here in the Philippines. Power tripping supervisors, team leads cheating on their partners with the new hires, mean girls type of bullying, people stealing someone else's food on the fridge. Story 252. The military in particular are the ones who make a career out of it. Not all, but most have enormous egos and tend to be abusive. Story 253. Controversial take, musicians. They are very passionate, dedicated people. But almost every musician I've ever met, from classical to rock to EDM, I found out later has been some kind of intimacy pest. Story 254. Politicians. Never knew of one who didn't have a lot to hide and never met one who wasn't downright despicable in any imaginable way. Story 255. Not all, but Uber Eats drivers. Near me, they gather in groups of 6 to 10 near popular restaurants and catcall women walking by. They drive incredibly aggressive and block intersections and make U-turns all over. They rent an apartment between 8 to 10 of them and take turns sleeping in the cars. I have seen these groups throughout LA. They all have brand new Toyotas with paper plates for 6 months. I have towed 2 of their cars for parking in my spot overnight. Story 256. I really think it's any job that offers incentives for people to put themselves ahead of anything else in order to succeed. I mean, if you're an executive, there's a very clear incentive to cut costs and make profit, because your continued employment and compensation are dependent on it. But this sets you up to essentially screw others, the environment, etc. over for your own gain. Having systems that rely on people to be both self-aware, ethical, and moral enough to put others ahead of themselves in the face of counter-incentives is not a recipe for success. Story 257. Marketers have always been soulless and vapid in my experience. I think it comes from spending all day pretending something is brilliant and of great use when it's not. Story 258. There are hardly any excesses of the most crazed psychopath that cannot easily be duplicated by a normal, kindly family man who just comes into work every day and has a job to do. Terry Pratchett, small gods having said that, anyone responding to an opening position for torturer is not someone I would care to be acquainted with on even a personal basis. Story 259. Nepalese politicians and bureaucrats. Somehow maybe it's genetic, because how do their entire families turn out to be assholes too? Story 260. Professional driving, e.g. trucking. They think they're better than everyone else, usually rude and poor manners, holier-than-thou attitude to driving. Everyone else is stupid and shouldn't be allowed to even sit in a vehicle. They don't care, they do what they like, and will quite happily pick fights with the police because they are never wrong. You see them all the time in the comments on dashcam clips on YouTube. Story 261. Politicians, job and family services, caseworkers, social security, the DMV, BMV, Medicaid claims specialists. Pretty much just the government, LOL. I didn't do that on purpose, but after a once-over, I recognized a trend. Story 262. Police and armed security. I personally went to school with a kid that wasn't too Bertie, and he became a cop with a chip on his shoulder. I had to deal with him as the department's mechanic. Story 263. The latest scam I've been encountering is people pretending to be my current insurance provider. They're sending me an official-looking postcard with their logo and all, saying I'm eligible for a 100 rebate just for calling them and providing some information, which happens to be my bank account number for them to deposit it. As soon as I told them I don't give out my banking info over the phone, they hang up on me.